All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the one last time final round. We are very excited. We have two awesome teams that have worked their way up through the tournament, and they're going to give you a great show with this wonderful case. Before we get to the team competition, though, I want to introduce you to our great panel of judges that we have assembled for this one last time panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have each of them turn on their camera and tell us a little bit about themselves so that everybody can get to know who these judges are before we start the final round. So first of all, I'm going to start with our presiding judge, Judge David Nelmark. If you can join us on the screen and just give a little bit about yourself.
Good evening. I started competing in mock trial in 6th grade and really never stopped. Competed and coached at Drake University and then at Stanford Law School. When I was at Stanford, I joined the AMTA board, ultimately became the president, and now I judge trials for real. Thank you.
Great. And Judge Nelmark also presided over last year's OLT final round, so it's great to have him back. Next up, I'm going to introduce you to Gotham Sood.
Oops. Hey everyone, my name is Gotham Sood. I was a competitor for UCLA way back when, longer ago than I probably want to remember. Mock trial has been an extremely important part of my life. I ended up actually marrying my wife, who I met during mock trial. I ended up doing trial at Loyola Law School. I was a criminal prosecutor for about a decade before I ended up switching gears and now currently work at UCLA Anderson School of Management. In the area of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I just want to wish both sides very, very good luck and congratulations on making it to the final round.
Awesome, thanks Gotham. Next up, we have Kelly Casey.
Hi, I am Kelly Casey. I'm the Director of Advocacy at the University of Georgia School of Law. I have been coaching our moot court and mock trial teams for the past 21 years. So obviously I started when I was really young, and I have had so many students over the years that were involved in college mock trial. And of course, I love when college mock trial students come to Georgia, and I'm happy to be here and look forward to seeing all the talent.
Thank you, Kelly. And then next up, we have Alicia Mack.
Here I am. Good evening. So I'm Alicia Mack. I'm a solo practitioner. I specialize in plaintiffs, workers' comp, and personal injury. I competed in mock trial at undergrad at Washington University in St. Louis, again in law school at Georgia State Law, and then also coached a high school mock trial team for several years. So I'm excited for the opportunity to judge a final round. And like everyone else, really want to wish all the contestants a congratulations for making it this far.
Thank you, Alicia. And then finally, but not, I don't know, I can't remember that phrase, Jeremy Daly.
Good evening. My name is Jeremy Daly. I am a prosecutor at Fulton County District Attorney's Office. I handle domestic violence, rape, and homicide. I have coached mock trial for UGA Law under Kelly Casey for about 5 years now, and I also coached Georgia State undergraduate mock trial for a year as well, so I know how much work you'll have to put into this. I'm looking forward to watching this round.
Awesome, thank you, Jeremy. All right, so those are your final round judging panelists. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Judge Nelmark, and we will go ahead and begin the round.
Good evening, counsel. Are there any housekeeping matters to address before we get started? Let's hear from the prosecution first.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening. Would you like to hear appearances from both sides first?
That'd be great.
Good evening, Your Honor. Well, depending on what time zone you're from, my name is Veronica Bito, and along with my co-counsel, Keegan Coppola, we will be representing Sana Yoshida in today's case before you.
Thank you. Let's get appearances from the defense.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Sahil Nirurkar. I'm joined by my colleague, Michael Zhao.
Good evening, Your Honor.
Good evening.
As well as our summer intern, Will Wilson, who will be sharing his screen to show exhibits and demonstratives throughout today's trial.
Good evening, Your Honor.
Good evening.
And together we represent the defendant in today's case, Woodward High School.
All right, very good. Does the state have any additional pretrial matters?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff would like to invoke Rule 603 and 615, which calls for the constructive swearing in and sequestration of all witnesses barring party representatives. The plaintiff today does not have a party representative, Your Honor.
Okay, noted.
Your Honor, also at this time, I would like to direct your attention to pretrial evidentiary ruling number 20. My tech chair is sharing it right now, and it states that exhibits 2, 3, and 7 are pre-admitted and can be referenced during opening and closing statements, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
And Your Honor, can we assume for the purposes of screen sharing that all exhibits that are shown on the screen are constructively shown from outside the jury, and when they're entered, we do not have to publish it to the jury?
That's fine.
And lastly, Your Honor, we ask that at any point, especially over a virtual format, that if you cannot see us at any of the advocates at any point or our witnesses, to please let us know.
I will certainly do that. And if I've accidentally muted myself, you let me know.
Yes, Your Honor. And just before we rest, we would also like to know your preferences for screen sharing. Would you like us to ask before sharing our screen, or would you like us to state on the record?
I have no preference. Whatever you want to do in that regard is fine.
Thank you, Your Honor. The plaintiff is ready to proceed.
Okay. First, from the defense, with respect to the rule, the pretrial ruling that was cited, or any of the other states' matters, they asked me to take notation of, do you disagree with anything that was said?
No, Your Honor, we agree with their interpretation of the pretrial orders they mentioned. We just like to note that pursuant to 615, our party representative is Mel Michalik.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Yes, Your Honor, just a couple of evidentiary matters that were ruled on before trial began that we just like to make Your Honor aware of. First, pursuant to pretrial order 6, we just like to note that Judge Heitens has already ruled that previous actions of Coach Steiner are admissible character evidence under 404B. It doesn't mean we can't object under other rules, but it might just explain why we won't be objecting character evidence to that specific testimony.
Okay, noted.
Next, under pretrial order 7, Judge Heitens ruled that the plaintiff may not pursue a theory of vicarious liability on the part of Coach Steiner. So as it comes to the plaintiff's burden in today's case and respondeat superior, Coach Steiner will be treated as separate from Woodward High School.
All right.
And lastly, Your Honor, we just wanted to make the court aware that pursuant to case law Sawhill v. Samuel J. Newarker High School, Woodward High School does count as a corporation when it comes to respondeat superior, other case law that we have.
Okay.
And with that, Your Honor, ready to proceed to opening statements.
All right. Does the state have any disagreement, or the plaintiff have any disagreement with any of the things stated by the defense?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. The plaintiff may begin with your opening statement when you're ready. Ms. Coppola, you are currently muted. Your microphone icon is still red, so there's got to be something within Zoom you need to click. Still not hearing you, but the
You can hear me all right?
There we go. Now I can hear and see you. You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honors, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, opposing counsel, may it please the court. They looked the other way. On May 25th, 2019, Sena Yoshida was looking forward to her future. She was the star player of the Woodward High School baseball team. She had college scouting opportunities, fans and teammates cheering for her, so many friends at school. But on May 25th, during the state championship game, Senna struck out in the final inning. Her team, the Woodchucks, lost the game. Her coach, Alex Steiner, lost his temper. As you will hear, he grabbed a baseball bat, threw it at Senna Yoshida, and hit her in the head. As a result, Senna suffered a traumatic brain injury, fell into a coma, and is still in the process of recovering from that day. Members of the jury, we're here today because what happened to Senna Yoshida was preventable. You'll hear today that Alex Steiner didn't just make a mistake on the field, but rather he had a pattern of dangerous coaching for years. You will learn that he was unfit to coach before he joined Woodward High, and that he continued to pose a risk to Senna and other students like her while he was employed there. That's why we've sued Woodward High School for negligent hiring and retention. All that means is we have to prove 5 elements to you today. That Ms. Steiner was hired and employed by Woodward High School, that Mr. Steiner was unfit for his job and posed a risk to others, that Woodward High School knew or should have known she was unfit, that his unfitness or incompetence harmed Senna Yoshida, and that it was Woodward High School's negligence in hiring and retaining Mr. Steiner that ultimately caused Senna's injury, her traumatic brain injury. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to prove these elements to you by a preponderance of the evidence, which just means more likely than not. During the course of today's trial, you'll learn about the hiring process at Woodward High School. Of course, Woodward High checked references before hiring Mr. Steiner, but as you'll hear, when those references were unfavorable, Woodward looked the other way. You'll hear that past employers had concerns about Coach Steiner's ability to deal with stress, his anger issues, his aggressive coaching style. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll hear warning after warning about Alex Steiner's history. But Woodward High was so concerned with winning that they looked the other way. Today, you'll hear from Amari Bahamilla, a local journalist in Midlands. She'll tell you that she investigated Alex Steiner's history as a baseball coach and found he was unfit. He was a risk to others for years before the events of May 25th, 2019. You'll hear of multiple complaints against Alex Steiner from former students and parents, complaints of aggression, threats, violence towards students, complaints that Woodward High School should have known about when they hired her. Ms. Bajamilla will testify to her attempt to notify Woodward High School and how they looked the other way when she tried to tell the truth. You'll also hear from Casey Diaz, speaking as an umpire and firsthand witness to Coach Steiner's anger and aggression after he was hired. As Ms. Diaz will explain, Alex Steiner would hit, kick, punch objects on the field. He would mark students who made mistakes, yank their helmets off, scream and swear at children. As you will hear, ladies and gentlemen, May 25th, 2019 was not the first time Coach Steiner had a fit of rage at a Woodchucks game. You'll learn that a month before the state championship game, Alex Steiner grabbed a baseball bat and threw it towards a player. Ms. Diaz will testify that she notified Woodward High of this behavior, and when she did, they looked the other way, retaining Alex Steiner without so much as suspension? Ladies and gentlemen, take notice of these patterns. Over the course of today's trial, you will see who Mr. Steiner was when he was hired. He had a history of hurting his own students. And while this information is upsetting, infuriating, difficult to look at, do not look away. Today, you will hear the events leading up to this horrible moment. And as you listen to the facts, ask yourself, is this the first time Coach Steiner posed a threat to children? Could this have been prevented? Ask this when you hear that the defendant has a history of injuring his players. Ask it when you read Coach Steiner's references. when you see parent complaints, when you hear from school administration, when you recognize a pattern. Is the defendant's negligence a proximate cause of Sana Yoshida's brain injury? Members of the jury, we're confident you'll find that more likely than not, the answer to those questions is yes. That's why at the conclusion of today's trial, my co-counsel, Veronica Bito, will come before you. We ask that you find Woodward High School liable for negligent hiring and negligent retention. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. We'll hear from the defense at this time.
Your Honor, can you see and hear me okay?
Just fine, thank you.
May it please the court. Opposing counsel, members of the jury. What did they know? And what did he hide? As I was listening to plaintiff counsel speak to you a moment ago, I noticed there are a few things we agree with. We agree that what happened to Sana Yoshida was a tragedy. We agree that the coach was responsible for it. You see, members of the jury, we're not here to dispute what the coach did, but what the school knew. See, as I was listening to plaintiff counsel tell you those things, I also noticed there are a couple things she left out. Two questions that sit at the heart of today's case. Two questions that the plaintiff won't be able to answer today. What did the school know about Coach Steiner? And what did Coach Steiner hide from them? Members of the jury, those questions are important because they go straight to the burden that the plaintiff has to meet today. The plaintiff has brought two claims against Woodward High School today: negligent hiring and negligent retention. And what that means is that the plaintiff has a lot of work to do. It's not good enough for them to prove to you that Coach Steiner was unfit. It's not good enough for them to prove to you that his unfitness led to Sana Yoshida's injury. There's a third element. See, the plaintiff must prove to you today that it's more likely than not that Woodward High School knew about his unfitness while they employed him and when they hired him. Now, as the defense, we don't have a burden in today's case, but we're going to zero in on that third element. We're going to show you how the school couldn't have known about Coach Steiner's unfitness. And we're going to do it by asking those same questions. What did the school know? And what did the coach hide? So first, what did the school know? You're going to hear from the athletic director at Woodward High School, the person in charge of hiring and firing coaches. We expect him to tell you everything they knew about Coach Steiner during his employment, having read a completely clean criminal record, how they read glowing references, and how they never received a single complaint from students, parents, or the community at large. That'll bring us to our next point. What did the coach hide? You're actually going to hear from Coach Steiner himself, and he'll be the first to admit that he's made serious mistakes. He threw the bat at Sana Yoshida, and he's gotten angry before. But we also expect the coach to tell you that at every turn, he hid his anger from his employer. Members of the jury, throughout today's trial, we expect the plaintiff to make this case a lot about Coach Steiner, what he's done in the past, and the awful things he did on May 25th, 2019. But Coach Steiner isn't the defendant today. We're not here to ask if he's a good coach or even if he's a good person. The only questions that matter, and that will matter throughout today's trial, are what did they know and what did he hide? At the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Mr. Zhao, he's going to ask you those questions. consider the answers we provided and ask you to find Woodward High School not liable. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the plaintiff prepared to call your first witness at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff calls Casey Diaz to the stand. Permission to proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, but it looks as if the witness is still, no, now she is unmuted. Thank you. Go ahead.
Can you please state your name for the record?
Hi, my name is Casey Diaz.
Ms. Diaz, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm actually a student. I go to Wyatt State for accounting and English, and I'm there on an athletic scholarship. I've been playing sports, mostly diving and baseball, since I can remember.
Ms. Diaz, can you tell us how you got started out in baseball?
I can. I'm actually the youngest of four. I got three brothers. So, my dad would always tell me I'm not going to make 2 trips when he brought them to baseball practice. He just dropped me off 2. And I started playing then. I never gave it up. In high school, I got serious about it. I started getting some umpire training and I got certified.
Ms. Diaz, as an umpire, did you ever come in contact with Alex Steiner?
I did. He was the coach of the Woodward Woodchucks, and he changed their record pretty drastically when he was coaching, I remember. He was also Sana Yoshida's coach.
Ms. Diaz, can you tell us who Sana Yoshida was?
She was a pitcher. She was actually their star pitcher at Woodward, but then later on in her high school career, she got an injury, a concussion on the field.
Ms. Diaz, do you know why you're in court today?
I do. I was at the game when she got injured. I was actually the umpire. I saw Coach Steiner throw a baseball bat at her.
Ms. Diaz, how often did you observe Coach Steiner out in the baseball field?
I probably saw him at least 5 different games in 2019.
Let the record reflect that my tech chair is displaying a demonstrative of a timeline. Now, Ms. Diaz, do you remember the first game that you saw Mr. Steiner coaching?
I do. That was in March.
And what did you see in March of 2019?
Well, it was my first time seeing him coach, but I immediately noticed him yelling. He was yelling at students, and I watched him grab one player's shoulders and shake him. And I was so uncomfortable, I wanted to file a report against him, but I didn't do that until later in the year.
When did you file that report, Ms. Diaz?
That was in April.
And what event led to you filing that report against Mr. Steiner?
Well, I was the umpire at another game, and if I remember correctly, the Woodchucks, they weren't doing very well. And all of a sudden, Coach Steiner got angry again. He started yelling. He walked up to this student and he called him an effing idiot. He grabbed onto his helmet and he yanked it off. And I saw him throw a baseball bat at another student when I asked him to leave the stadium.
Thank you. We can take down that timeline for now. Now, Ms. Diaz, why would anyone file a report like this against a coach?
You file a report when you think that a student's health or safety might be at risk. When you get certified, they teach you how to file them. They basically get sent out to the athletic directors at the coach's high school so that they can know that their students might be in a challenging situation. I filed one after I saw Coach Steiner getting violent with that student and throwing things. I wanted people to know.
And to your knowledge, what happened after you filed that report, Ms. Diaz?
I didn't notice anything change. Coach Steiner was still coaching. He was still working at Woodward.
Were you ever an umpire for another game that Mr. Steiner coached?
I was. I was an umpire at a game in May, on May 25th, 2019.
Now I want to break down that day. Can you tell us how it started?
Sure. I was actually the home plate umpire, so I remember that day pretty clearly because I had never been in that position before and I was excited. And the first thing I remember was getting there and there were all these big time college scouts and reporters there. It was set up to be a real competitive game.
And how was the game going, Ms. Diaz?
Well, it really was competitive. And no one even scored until the third inning. And then it was all Sana Yoshida. I mean, she took off. She was doing an incredible job. She really was a superstar. Well, at least at first. Later on, she started to take a little bit of a turn.
What do you mean by that, Ms. Diaz?
She started to miss a couple and I had to call some hits against her. And when I made my first call against Woodward, that's when Coach Steiner started getting real mad at me.
What did you see Mr. Steiner do when he got mad?
He walked up onto the field, got all in my face, started telling me that I was blind and that I shouldn't be an umpire, just cussing and screaming at me. And then he walked off the field, went right to his team.
Let the record reflect, we are putting up that timeline back up again. And Ms. Diaz, after Mr. Steiner got angry and yelled at you, what happened next?
He went back to the dugout, like I said, to his team, and he started yelling at those students. And then Sana Yoshida came in off the field, and he looked right at her, and he threw a baseball bat at her.
Ms. Diaz, does this timeline accurately reflect when you saw Mr. Steiner get violent at those baseball games?
Yes, that's what I remember seeing in 2019.
Thank you. We can put that timeline away now. Now, Ms. Diaz, after what happened after that baseball bat left Mr. Steiner's hands and hit you in the head?
She fell to the ground. She wasn't moving. And I think someone must have called an ambulance because they arrived not long afterwards.
Ms. Diaz, to your knowledge, has Sana Yoshida ever played baseball again?
No, I have never seen her play another game since then.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Good evening, Ms. Diaz.
Good evening, sir.
Ma'am, you told us a lot on direct examination about the incidents that occurred in March and April of 2019, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, ma'am, I want to talk about what you didn't tell us about those incidents. Mr. Wilson, if you could bring that timeline up. Ma'am, in April of 2019, when you tell us that you saw Coach Steiner yell at players and grab and shake that student, you never actually saw anyone from the Woodward athletic department in the stands.
I don't know. I don't remember looking for anyone. No.
You didn't see the Woodward athletic director, Mr. Mitchell, watching that game, did you?
I don't know if he was there or not.
Ma'am, in April of 2019, when you told us about that second incident, you didn't see Mr. Michalak at that game either.
In April, I don't remember. I don't remember seeing him. I'm not sure if he was there.
Ma'am, you're not sure if anyone from the Woodward athletic department was there during that game, right?
No, sir. I was focused on the players.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. You could take that down. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about that April 2019 game. Ma'am, you told us on direct examination how you filed an incident report after that game, right?
I did. I filed an MHSAA report.
Well, I want to be clear about something, ma'am. You can't be certain that report was ever sent to Woodward High School.
Yes, it was.
Well, ma'am, you didn't send that report to Woodward High School yourself.
Actually, after you file a report, it gets sent out to the high school. So I filed it and the system's automated. So it did.
Ma'am, it's your testimony today that you sent that report yourself? You saw it go through?
I didn't walk it over to their office, but I did file it with the Athletic Association, which is an official association.
So, ma'am, that's a no to my question. You didn't file that report and send it yourself.
No, I didn't bring it to their office.
Ma'am, you actually can't show us any receipts that the report was sent.
No, after I file it, it's sent to my hands and the athletic officials deal with it. Excuse me, out of my hands, pardon me.
Ma'am, you don't know if Woodward High School actually ever received it.
No, I don't work there.
From what you know, ma'am, Coach Steiner wasn't suspended after that game.
No, he wasn't.
He was able to keep coaching, right?
He was.
But ma'am, you can tell us that after that incident, his behavior changed.
It did. There were a couple games where I didn't see any violence.
Exactly, ma'am. I want to talk about those couple of games where he umped Coach Steiner and his team. You didn't hear him yell at anyone during those games.
No, not that I remember.
Didn't see him throw any equipment.
No, sir.
You thought he seemed supportive of his players, right?
I did, yes.
After that, you learned how he was coaching the championship game on May 25th, right?
Yes, that's right.
Ma'am, you weren't worried.
Sir, excuse me, I don't know. Worried about Coach Steiner?
Ma'am, you weren't concerned about the players' safety.
Sure I was. That's why I filed the report.
Ma'am, is your testimony today that when you heard Coach Steiner was going to coach that game, you were worried about the players' safety?
In May? No, sir. I wasn't worried in May.
Ma'am, in May, you didn't go to the school and say, hey, I don't think Steiner should coach for this game.
No. Well, like I said, he had been okay. I was hoping that maybe he changed or something. I don't know.
I want to talk about what you don't know about Woodward High School. Ma'am, like I told us earlier, you don't work there.
No, I don't.
You've never spoken to their athletic director about Coach Steiner?
No, not directly, just me and the other umpire who filed that report.
You've never spoken to anyone at Woodward High School about Coach Steiner?
No. Like I said, the umpires were not affiliated with this school, so we go through the other system, the administrative system. So no.
Ma'am, I'm not asking you about whether or not you're affiliated. I'm asking if you ever spoke to anyone at Woodward High School about Coach Steiner, and you didn't.
No, sir. Umpires have a different system to go through.
So, ma'am, you can't tell us everything they knew about Coach Steiner when he was employed.
No.
Can't tell us what they knew about Coach Steiner when they hired him.
No, I can't. Just what I saw when I was at the games.
You certainly can't tell us, ma'am, if he hid anything from Woodward High School.
No, I don't know what he did with the high school. I just know what was clear to me from being at those games.
Thank you for your time, ma'am. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Ms. Diaz, I want to talk to you about something Mr. Zhao brought up on your cross-examination. Can you briefly explain to us what happens after you file an incident report against the coach?
Sure, I can. So we have these umpire-only meetings and we talk about coach's conduct. And that's how I found another umpire who had also heard about bad conduct. Anyway, we eventually filed a report together complaining about that conduct. And when you file it, it goes off to the MHSAA and they automatically send a copy to the athletic directors at both of the different schools. So the umpires don't necessarily deal with it directly, but we have higher ups who are not in high school who deal with those kinds of things.
And Ms. Diaz, to your knowledge, is there any reason why a school would never receive reports about one of their coaches?
No, I've never heard that there were any problems with the system. Maybe if their email was horribly down or something, but I don't think so.
Objection, speculation.
Your Honor, it's not speculation. If I may respond.
You may.
Your Honor, I asked the witness to her knowledge, based on her experience being on the Umpire Association, filing this incident report. It's well within her scope to testify to this matter.
May I respond, Your Honor?
You may.
Your Honor, we already heard from Ms. Diaz that she doesn't work at Woodward High School, that she's never worked there, that she hasn't talked to people there about their receiving process for these incident reports. Therefore, for her to talk about why they might or might not have received that report, that goes out of her knowledge and that's speculation.
Sustained.
Yes, Your Honor, motion to strike that question and answer.
The answer is stricken.
Ms. Diaz, is it your job to follow up with any schools about any incident reports that you file against them?
No, not as an umpire in high school. I was 17 at the time.
Thank you, Ms. Diaz. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross examination?
No recross, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. This witness is excused. Give me 1 moment before you call your second witness.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. The plaintiff may call your next witness if you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff calls Amari Bajamila to the stand. May I proceed?
You may.
Good evening, Ms. Bajamila. Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amari Bajamila.
What do you do for a living?
Currently, I work as a sports journalist with BNN. It's a local news network based here in Midlands.
How did you get started in sports journalism?
Well, I actually always thought I'd end up as a foreign correspondent, so I studied journalism at university. When I was there, I studied abroad here in Midlands, took a sports media class, and, well, realized just how exciting the world of sports really can be. I transferred, finished up my degree, and I've been working in the field ever since.
Do you know why you're here in court today?
Yes, I was reporting on the Woodchucks state championship game on May 29th of 2019. I also conducted an investigation into Alex Steiner's coaching methods in relation to that incident.
Had you ever seen Coach Steiner's coaching methods prior to 2019?
Oh yes, I've been attending local games since about 2016. In 2019, though, I only attended 2 of the Woodchucks games, an away game in early March and the state championship in May.
Do you know when Coach Steiner first started working with the Woodchucks?
I believe I started seeing him at games in 2017. So 18 to 19 would have been his second season as a head coach.
Now, I'd like to talk a little bit more specifically about what you saw. You mentioned 2 games, and I'll take those one by one. Would you tell the court about the game you watched in the start of early March?
All right, like I said, it was an away game, quite a thrilling match between the Woodchucks and the Otters, their arch rivals in Midlands. One of the Woodchucks players made a bit of an error and, I saw Mr. Steiner react quite negatively.
What do you mean he reacted negatively?
He started shouting and cursing at the poor student. The umpire of the game had to get involved and ended up ejecting Mr. Steiner from the field.
Now, let's talk about the second game you saw. Could you tell us about the Woodchucks game on May 25th?
It was another nail-biter event, the state championship game, again, between the Woodchucks and the Otters. A great game to spectate until the end. The star player of the Woodchucks, Sana Yoshida, struck out, and the Woodchucks ended up losing the game.
What happened after the Woodchucks lost the game?
Well, I heard Mr. Steiner shouting quite loudly again. And then I saw a baseball bat flying through the air and hitting Miss Yoshida right in the head.
Did you see where this baseball bat came from?
Yes, I saw it come from the Woodchucks' dugout area, which is the same place I heard Mr. Steiner's voice coming from.
And what happened after Ms. Yoshida was hit in the head with a baseball bat?
She fell to the ground. I later saw her leave the field in an ambulance. During my investigation in this case, I also obtained a copy of her medical report from when she went to the ER.
Would you recognize a copy of this medical report in court today?
Yes, I would.
Let the record reflect my co-counsel is screen sharing what's been pre-admitted as Exhibit 3. Ms. Bajamila, what do you see on your screen right now?
This is a copy of that ER report, which diagnosed Sana Yoshida with a traumatic brain injury.
According to this report, what caused Ms. Yoshida's brain injury?
The baseball bat, which hit her in the head.
Thank you, Mr. Farnsworth. You can take that down. Now, Ms. Bajamila, I know you found this document in your investigation. I want to talk a little bit more about that. How did your investigation start?
I like to say that investigative journalism is a lot of targeted Googling and finding the right sources to ask your questions. What that means in this case is that I found Mr. Steiner's CV through websites which advertise athletics jobs. I also contacted members of my own sporting network to send over any information they had about him.
What did your contacts tell you?
I found that Mr. Steiner had been previously employed as a baseball coach at several other institutions. I also learned that multiple complaints had been filed against Mr. Steiner, specifically for his coaching methods.
Would you recognize a copy of those complaints in court today?
Oh, certainly I would.
Let the record reflect my co-counsel is screen sharing what's been pre-admitted as Exhibits 7A and 7B. Ms. Bajamila, what do you see on your screen?
Right, these are the two incident reports from two of Mr. Steiner's former employers, Irvine High and Wheat Swamp High.
How many complaints did you find in total?
In just these two incident reports, I found 9 separate complaints, ma'am.
Mr. Farnsworth, could we highlight those complaints for the jury? Ms. Bajamila, what are these complaints about?
Well, as you can see on the screen, they indicated some rather concerning behavior by Mr. Steiner, yelling, cursing, threatening students, in some cases, even acting violently towards them.
What do you mean acting violently towards students?
Well, some of the complaints specifically mention Mr. Steiner grabbing a student's arm until it bruised. In another case, he threw a baseball at them. And in yet another case, he even punched them in the face.
Have you ever seen Mr. Steiner behave like this at a woodchuck game?
Yes and no. I've seen him yell and shout and curse at students multiple times. And of course, the baseball bat, which hit Miss Yoshida in the head, came from Mr. Steiner's direction.
Thank you, Mr. Farnsworth. We can take those down. Ms. Bajamila, were those complaints difficult to find?
No, not at all. In fact, they were rather easy for me to find. Just one phone call to my contacts and I obtained them immediately.
Objection, Your Honor, to substantially more misleading than probative. May I explain?
You may.
Your Honor, we understand that what the plaintiff is trying to do with this testimony is show that somehow Woodward High School should have gotten access to these documents because they were, as the witness said, easy to find. However, what they didn't put in their answer just now was that the reason this witness found it so easy to find these documents is that she used personal college friend contacts. Because she left out that information, Your Honor, this evidence is misleading to the members of the jury about how easy it might have been for Woodward High School to get these information.
May I respond, Your Honor?
You may.
The probative value of this statement, as Mr. Nurikart specifically just stated, is in establishing whether or not Woodward High School should have known. As such, it's extremely probative to understand how difficult this information is to access. Under Rule 403, information must be substantially more prejudicial or potentially misleading than it is probative. I believe that this extremely high bar has not been met, as there's substantial probative value. How Ms. Bajamila came to this conclusion, I believe that Mr. Nurkar's argument goes to a weight rather than the admissibility of this evidence, as she has different contacts than Athletic Director Michalek, but it's also possible that Ms. McCulloch had her own references and experience at hand.
Your Honor, if I may.
Briefly.
We think the misleading quality of this evidence comes from what the plaintiff left out of her answer, what it left out of the witness's answer, that she was relying not just on contacts, but personal college friends. The fact that she found it easy to get these documents because she had friends in these athletic departments makes the probative value of this evidence low, and the misleading quality is high, Your Honor, because the jury hasn't heard why it was easy for her.
May I respond, Your Honor?
No. The concerns raised by counsel can be inquired about on cross-examination. The objection is overruled. You may continue.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Bajamila, were these complaints hard for you to find?
Not at all. Like I was saying, just one phone call to my contacts yielded all these complaints.
And to the best of your knowledge, has Woodward High ever seen these?
Well, as soon as I received them, I mailed copies of them to Mr. Michalek, the athletics director at Woodward High. I never heard back from him, though.
After you sent these documents, do you know if Coach Steiner was ever suspended?
Quite the contrary, actually. Just a few months later, I saw him still coaching the Woodchucks at the championship game in May.
Objection, Your Honor, to a lack of foundation. If I may explain.
You may.
Opposing counsel's question was, do you know if the coach was ever suspended? The witness answered that a few months later I saw him coaching, therefore he wasn't suspended. We don't think that answer has the foundation to give the affirmative no that she gave in her answer.
May I respond, Your Honor?
You may.
The no in the witness's answer was to the question of, do you know? As such, the witness testified to how she obtained the information that she had, laying foundation for her ultimate answer.
So the question was whether she knew?
Yes, Your Honor.
Objections overruled.
Ms. Bajamila, after you sent these complaints, do you know if Mr. Steiner was suspended?
No, I don't, but I saw him coaching again in May of that year.
Do you know if Mr. Steiner was reprimanded prior to 2019?
Yes, based on those documents, the complaints I found during my investigation, I'm aware that Mr. Steiner was reprimanded on several occasions.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
May I respond, Your Honor?
May.
The witness is speaking directly to the contents of Exhibit 7, which is pre-admitted, has been published to the jury during the course of this direct examination, and therefore is an in-court statement being offered for the truth of the matter asserted. As
Your Honor,
such, this is not hearsay.
Excuse me. Your Honor, if I may.
May.
We believe we have a good faith basis that the witness is actually relying on documents she found that aren't Exhibit 7A. If I may proffer, we have it on a good faith basis that she's actually relying on Exhibits 9. This is different, Your Honor. This isn't the information found in 7, and it's not pre-admitted.
The witness has not said what she's relying on. Would you like to voir dire the witness at this time?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. You may proceed.
Ma'am, I want to be clear about which documents you're referring to when you say you know that he was reprimanded.
Absolutely, sir.
You only know that Coach Steiner was fired because of other documents, not those complaints, right?
That's not correct, sir.
Ma'am, is your testimony that you know Coach Steiner was fired from Exhibit 7?
I believe the second line of Exhibit 7A refers to a complaint from June of 2016, stating that the cause of Mr. Steiner's termination, or rather that he was terminated for cause, And then later on, it explains the complaint leading to his termination, sir.
Ma'am, are you saying that Exhibit 7 mentions what happened, not just a recommendation?
No, it mentions that he was terminated for cause, listing the cause below.
Mr. Wilson, could you bring up Exhibit 7 for us? Go to 7A if you could. Now, ma'am, I want to make sure I'm going to the place you were talking about. You're talking about the second line of Exhibit 7?
Oh, excuse me, sir. It's actually the third line. Reason for leaving, terminated for cause.
Excuse me, are you talking about the reason for leaving, termination for cause?
Yes, the third line of Exhibit 7A, right under that header.
You're telling us that that line says that he was reprimanded for anger?
Well, I mean, termination does exist on the spectrum of reprimands, and cause, I'm assuming, is the cause below, the throwing a baseball and striking a complainant's child on the arm while yelling at them about pitching.
Ma'am, nowhere in that third line that you mentioned does it say he was reprimanded for those complaints specifically, does it?
Terminate, reprimand. I'm a linguist. I love talking about language. I would include them in the same bucket of consequences.
Just redirect you back to my question, ma'am. Nowhere does it say explicitly that he was terminated for the complaints that you were talking about, right?
It says terminated for cause, sir.
So that's a no to my question, ma'am. He doesn't say, or rather that document doesn't say terminated for these complaints.
I'm a bit unclear as to what the difference is, sir. Terminated for cause, and then the cause being listed below, those reasons being the complaints.
Ma'am, I just need a yes or no to my question. The line does not say termination for anger, violence, or complaints. Yes?
That's right. It just mentions the termination. The explanation is below.
Thank you. Your Honor, no further questions this voir dire. I would maintain my objection that this document that's pre-admitted does not say that he was reprimanded for the actions she's referring to. And we think there are other documents here, specifically Exhibit 9, that would be required to make that conclusion.
Any further response?
Yes, Your Honor. Might I request my co-counsel to screen share Exhibit 7 once more?
You may.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. If I can direct your attention once more to that third line in question of terminated for cause, Your Honors, given that the cause is listed in Exhibit 7, I would argue that this is one document, that Ms. Bajamila just testified as to knowing about his termination from Exhibit 7, and that terminations almost always include a reprimand, that the reprimand was one part of the termination and is therefore represented in this document.
Thank you. The objection is overruled.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Bajamila, do you know if Mr. Steiner was ever reprimanded prior to 2019?
That's right, and fired.
And do you know if any of Mr. Steiner's players have been injured before 2019?
Well, yes. Based on my investigation, I learned that Mr. Steiner had threatened his students on multiple occasions, and that several of them had been injured. It would appear that Ms. Yoshida's injuries are just the most serious.
Thank you, Ms. Bajamila. I have no further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Bajamila. I just have a few questions about the testimony you gave the members of the jury a moment ago, okay?
Absolutely. Fire away.
I want to start by talking about why you've chosen to testify in court today.
All right.
You're a reporter for BNN, right?
That's correct.
You don't want to be a reporter for BNN, though, do you?
Oh, no, I do. I'd like to progress in my career, certainly, but it's been a wonderful first job out of college.
Your actual goal is to work for one of the big sports networks, isn't that right?
Oh, yes. MESPN, every sports journalist's dream.
I want to talk about what you would do to get that job. You'd agree with me, you've embellished your stories to get noticed by the big networks, right?
Not when I was working in sports. When I was recounting local affairs like weddings, funerals, I like to add a bit of flair, you know.
So that's a yes to my question, ma'am. You've embellished your stories to get noticed by the big networks. Yes?
I like to think I write with flair. I wouldn't say I'm embellishing, sir.
So, ma'am, you wrote with flair, added flair to your stories to get noticed by the big networks.
That's correct.
You hoped that your investigation of Coach Steiner would be noticed by the big networks, right?
Absolutely. I think it's an important story to tell about the local community here in Midlands.
You're hoping the story you told to the members of the jury today will get you an interview at that big network.
Sure.
I want to talk about the flair you may have added to your story today. Ma'am, you told us on direct examination that those complaints were easy to get.
They were.
Ma'am, let's be clear. You had a personal contact at both Wheat Swamp and Irvine, right?
I'm a pretty good journalist, sir. I have lots of personal contacts in the sporting world.
College friends, wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yes, it's a small world here in sports journalism.
It was through those college friends that you were able to get those documents so easily, right?
That's correct.
Ma'am, you also know there was a third school you tried to get documents from, right?
Yes, a Long Island High.
You didn't have a college friend who worked at Long Island, did you?
That's true. Personal networks can only extend so far.
And it was very difficult to get documents from the school you didn't have a college friend at. Wouldn't you agree?
That's correct. Since I wasn't an athletics director, I couldn't make direct requests to that office.
So, ma'am, you didn't get a single document from the school you didn't have a college friend working at.
That's correct in this case, yes.
Ma'am, you certainly can't tell us if anyone at Woodward High School had a personal friend at Wheat Swamp, right?
No, I'm not aware of other people's friendship groups or personal networks, sir.
They certainly can't tell us if they had a personal friend at Irvine High School either.
No, but as they were hiring Mr. Steiner, I can't imagine giving a ring to the ADs would have been much trouble at all.
Your Honor, move to strike as non-responsive.
Overruled.
Ma'am, you don't know if anyone at Woodward High School could get those documents as easily as you could through those college friends.
No, I have no idea what steps Woodward High did or didn't take, sir.
Your investigation also didn't end at looking at those complaints, though, did it?
That's correct. I like to be thorough.
And there's actually some documents you found in your investigation that you didn't tell the members of the jury about a moment ago, right?
I found many documents about Mr. Steiner's coaching, sir.
Well, you recall some of those documents, the last documents you found were Coach Steiner's references, right?
Right. I found the complaints, his termination letters, and those references.
Man, when you read those reference letters, you were disappointed.
Yes, I was disappointed and puzzled that someone who had fired Mr. Steiner was giving him a reference for a new job.
You were disappointed because there wasn't any mention of those violent actions you read about years earlier.
That's not entirely correct, sir.
Ma'am, nowhere in those documents was there a mention of violence, right?
Not the word violence specifically. However, all three of the references do make reference to Mr. Steiner's very poor reactions to stress and other challenging circumstances.
Directing you back to my question, ma'am, nowhere in those documents is there a reference to violence.
There's a reference to concern, but not the word violence itself.
There's no reference to concerns about violence either, are there?
That particular phrasing, yes.
There's not even a reference to concerns about anger towards students, right?
Not in those documents, no.
Ma'am, after reading those reference letters, you thought the trail had run dry.
Initially, yes. I hadn't reviewed all the documents in today's case before I came to that brief conclusion.
Ma'am, those were the last documents you found in your investigation, right?
That's right, but I hadn't seen the events of May 25th just yet.
After reading those documents, you didn't think there was a pattern of angry or violent behavior, correct?
Not after reading the references specifically, but after reading the complaints, most certainly.
Ma'am, you read the reference letters after you read the complaints, didn't you?
That's right.
And after reading the reference letters and the complaints, you didn't think there was a pattern of violent behavior, yes or no?
That's not correct.
Ma'am, is it your testimony that after reading the references, you found a pattern?
No, based on reading the references, I didn't find a pattern. Based on reading the complaints, I was still concerned. There's a bit of a difference in my process, sir.
Let me make this perfectly clear. After you read the references, which were the last documents you read, you didn't find a pattern.
Not based on the references alone, sir.
After you read the references, you didn't think this story would be your big ticket to the big networks after all.
That's true.
Thank you. Your Honor, nothing further.
Redirect examination.
And Your Honor, may the witness be allowed to step down?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff rests our case in chief, and we ask for a brief recess if all loss permits.
I think we have time for that. How long a recess would you like?
If opposing counsel has no objection, 5 minutes, Your Honor.
How does the defense feel about 5 minutes?
That's good. That's good with us, Your Honor.
I show 7:02. We will reconvene at 7:07 Central Time. Thank you. See you shortly. Could counsel check in and let me know if you're ready to proceed?
The defense is here and ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Plaintiff is also ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Very good. Is the defense prepared to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Manuel Michalek to the stand. May I proceed?
You may.
Good evening. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Hello, hi. My name is Manuel Michalek. Last name spelled Michalak.
What do you do for a living?
I'm an athletic director, sir, at Woodward High School right here in Midlands.
What exactly does your work entail?
Well, for the most part, it entails a whole lot of paperwork, sir, but really my job is just making sure that all of our athletics programs are moving smoothly, that all the parents and coaches and students feel happy with what's going on, and that our programs are able to achieve at a high level.
Sir, do you know who Alex Steiner is?
I do, sir, yes. He was our baseball coach a couple seasons back.
When did you hire Coach Steiner?
We hired Coach Steiner in May of 2017 after our old baseball coach retired.
I want to walk through your hiring process in a little bit more detail for the members of the jury. What exactly do you look for in candidates for a position like baseball coach?
Sure. Well, our hiring process is really guided by two principles: competition and culture. We want an applicant that's going to be able to make the team succeed at the highest level possible, while at the same time maintaining a culture that's consistent with our values of having athletes be scholars and turning scholars into healthy young adults.
What materials do you request or look at specifically when you're considering applicants?
A lot of materials, sir. We ask for a full background check, 3 references, including 2 professional references from the most recent jobs, 3 steps of interviewing. It's extensive.
Did Coach Steiner go through that process you just described?
Yes, sir, he did. All of our applicants do.
I want to walk through what you knew about Coach Steiner when you hired him. Sir, did you perform that background check you mentioned?
Yes.
Did you find anything in it?
Well, what we found when we ran a background check is Coach Steiner's record was completely clean. There wasn't a conviction, an arrest, not even a parking ticket.
You also mentioned some professional references. Do you think you'd be able to recognize Coach Steiner's references if I were to show them to you?
I imagine I would, sir, yes.
Your Honor, at this time, we're sharing our screen with Exhibit 11A and 11B. Sir, what are we looking at here?
I believe these are the references that we got from Coach Steiner's 2 previous employers.
Do they look fair and accurate based off what you recall at the time you were hiring Coach Steiner?
They look exactly the same to me, sir, yes.
At this time, Your Honor, we offer Exhibits 11A and 11B into evidence.
Any objection to 11A or 11B?
The plaintiff has no objections, Your Honor, but asks that the jury be issued a limiting instruction regarding the hearsay statements of these documents.
What instruction do you propose?
That the jury be instructed that these statements are not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, but only for the subsequent action taken by Woodward High School.
Any objection to that instruction?
No objection, Your Honor. We're not offering for them for their truth.
11A and 11B are admitted, and we will constructively assume the jury has been so instructed.
Mr. Michalek, I want to walk through what you learned from these references. Let's start with 11A. What kinds of questions do you ask in these references regarding anger and stress?
Well, in our questionnaire, we actually have a 10-pronged ranking system where all of those references can rank the different skills of each applicant. And the very last question we ask is if there's anything else that we need to know about that applicant. That way we can get a ranking of how they manage stress, conflict, anger. And we also leave that totally open so that they can tell us if there are any problems in those areas.
What school wrote the reference in 11A?
That was Irvine High School, sir.
Does Irvine mention anything about anger or stress management problems?
No, sir, they don't mention anything about anger at all. They say that Coach Steiner sometimes could get a little stressed when the big games were up, but they made clear that it wasn't a serious problem, and Coach Steiner responded to feedback as necessary.
What about the second document there, 11B? Who wrote that one?
That one was from Long Island High School, sir.
What'd you learn from them in terms of anger or stress management problems?
Well, that reference was actually encouraging. It said that Coach Steiner struggled to adapt to situations sometimes, but that he recognized that weakness in his time there, and he improved noticeably in that department. That was really encouraging to us for the applicant, that we had somebody here who could respond to feedback and criticism, and rather than get defensive, accept it and grow from it. It's right in line with our values.
So do either of these references mention anything about Coach Steiner being violent or angry towards students in the past?
Absolutely not, sir. They don't.
Did either of these schools ever reach out to you separately to tell you about any wrong incidents or wrong behavior on the part of Coach Steiner?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. You can take the document down. So we've also heard about some documents that you were sent today. Were you here for Ms. Diaz's testimony?
Yes, sir. I've been here throughout trial today.
Did you hear her say there was some kind of electronically automated incident report sent your way?
I did hear Ms. Diaz say that, yes.
So first of all, in your experience, are those documents you received from MHSAA electronic emails?
I've never gotten an email from MHSAA. They run the baseball and they kind of like to keep it old fashioned. It's always paper mail with an American flag stamp on it.
Did you receive any kind of incident report from the MHSAA about Coach Steiner?
No, sir. We never received any incident report from the MHSAA at all that year.
Were you here for Ms. Bajamila's testimony, the reporter?
I was.
Did you hear her say that she sent some complaints in the mail to you?
I heard her say that, yes.
Sir, did you ever receive any kind of mail from Ms. Bajamila?
No, sir. We didn't get any mail from Ms. Bajamila, and the documents that she showed today weren't anything we've seen before.
I want to talk about what you know about Coach Steiner from his time at Woodward. So during his time at Woodward, did you ever receive any kind of complaints from students or parents regarding his behavior?
Absolutely not. The only complaints I got about Coach Steiner were about playing time from parents. And it always happened to be that the parent's child was the one not getting enough playing time. But other than those kinds of complaints, I never got anything else, certainly not about behavior.
Did you ever see or even hear about Coach Steiner being verbally abusive to his students?
No, sir. Absolutely not.
Did you even see, or did you see or even hear about Coach Steiner being violent towards his players before May 25th?
I never personally saw anything like that. And at Woodward, we have a pretty tight-knit community. I never heard anything about that either.
Sir, if you had heard such complaints or read the documents that we heard about from the plaintiff witnesses, what would you have done?
If I had seen documents like what was shown earlier today, I would have pulled Coach Steiner off the field immediately. Like I said before, we have values at Woodward High School, and things like verbal and physical abuse and throwing bats at students are totally inconsistent with those values and totally inconsistent with forming healthy young minds, which is what we try to do. I would have pulled him off the field immediately.
Thank you, Mr. Michalik. Your Honor, nothing further.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Mr. McCulloch. I'll be asking you a few questions on behalf of Senate Yoshida. Let's start with your role in hiring Alex Steiner at Woodward High School. You told us on direct you reviewed Mr. Steiner's references thoroughly. Can we get those back on screen? Now, you testified on direct that your references use a 10-prong system?
That's correct, the ranking system, yes.
But there's only 7 prongs on screen now, right?
I don't believe so, ma'am. I see 10.
In the references, your employees are rated from 1 to 7 in various categories.
Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. Maybe I wasn't clear earlier. I meant that there are 10 prongs that they're ranking them through. You see right there, it says A, overall quality through work, through J, overall integrity and judgment.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Ask about a 10 prong.
Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. McCulloch. So you use a rating scale of 1 to 7, right?
That's correct, we do.
And in 2 of 3 references, Ms. Steiner was given a 3 out of 7 for handling stress?
Yes, they listed those as one of their weaker areas. But like I said before, later in the reference, they speak extensively on how it wasn't a serious problem and how they improved on it in this time at the school.
So this 3 out of 7 didn't concern you?
Based on the fact that they clarified that it wasn't a serious problem, no.
And all 3 references mention that Mr. Steiner struggled with stress management.
They did.
Point of order, Your Honor. I think opposing counsel is referring to a third document of Exhibit 11C that hasn't been put into evidence yet. So we just ask they enter it before they ask questions about it.
Ms. Coppola, are you quoting the document or simply asking questions about it, or neither?
No, Your Honor. I'm merely asking the witness to attest to his recollection of the document and the steps that he took prior to hiring Mr. Alex Steiner.
Your Honor, if I may.
Okay.
If I remember the question specifically, it was all 3 documents mention problems with handling stress. That is a specific statement that she's drawing from Exhibit 11C, and Exhibit 11C isn't in evidence yet.
All right. The objection to the question, if it was worded that way, is sustained, but Ms. Coppola, you can rephrase.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. McCulloch, you knew that Mr. Steiner struggled with stress management?
Yes, in the ways that I described.
You knew that he sometimes became flustered?
That's right.
You knew that he didn't work well under pressure?
That's right. We had some concerns about that from the competitive side of things. You got to maintain composure in those tight games.
And you knew these, oh, please, I'm sorry, there's a Zoom lag, Mr. McCulloch.
I totally understand. Believe me, I got to deal with the parents on Zoom too. I was just mentioning that we had some competitive concerns about that vis-a-vis. You got to keep your composure as a coach and make the right decisions in tough games. But based on everything else we had, we thought he was still the guy for the job.
So at the time you hired Mr. Steiner, you knew that he had anger issues?
That's not correct, ma'am. No.
You knew that he struggled with stress management?
We knew that he sometimes got flustered and didn't adapt to situations, but like I said, the references clarified that they weren't a serious problem. And ma'am, I think that that's very different from knowing he struggled with anger issues.
But you didn't follow up with those references to talk about Mr. Steiner's low ratings?
Well, ma'am, when they clarify in the same document that it's not a serious problem, and they say it's just that sometimes he gets flustered during games, we didn't see any reason to follow up further, ma'am.
So you chose not to follow up with references after reading these documents, correct?
Given the fact that we gave them full leeway with the last question, is there anything else we need to know about this applicant? We didn't think a follow-up would yield any new information.
Redirecting you back to my original question, you did not follow up with these references?
That's correct, ma'am. We didn't need to.
And you'd agree that when you're hiring a coach, it's important to consider their fitness for the role?
Their fitness for the role is the number one factor, ma'am. That's correct.
So you consider if they have a history of anger issues?
100%.
You consider if they have a history of acting disrespectfully towards players?
Yes.
If they have a history of acting disrespectfully towards league officials?
We do.
And in court today, you're aware that Mr. Steiner did have a history of these behaviors, right?
I'm sorry, ma'am. Can you clarify?
Yes. As of today, you're aware that Mr. Steiner had a history of acting disrespectfully towards players and league officials.
That's what those documents I saw today said, ma'am. Yes, I wasn't at that game, so I don't know what happened exactly, but that's what that document said.
At this time, my co-counsel is screen sharing what's been pre-admitted as Exhibit 7B. Let's talk more about this document, Mr. McCulloch. Now, you testified on direct that you had never seen Exhibit 7 before. Do I have that right?
I never saw it before we hired Coach Steiner. I apologize if that wasn't clear.
You testified on direct that you hadn't seen it until Ms. Bajamila testified today. Do I have that right?
I don't believe you do, ma'am. I saw it when it was shown to me at my deposition, and obviously I saw it in court again today. I apologize if that wasn't clear.
Now, these are incident reports from Irvine High School.
That is what the document says, yes.
And these reports show that Mr. Steiner had grabbed a student's arm.
It says that, yes.
They say he'd hit a student in the face.
It says that too, ma'am, yes.
In fact, he threatened to hit a student with a baseball bat, didn't he?
It says that too.
Mr. McCulloch, you're telling us you didn't know about these complaints when you hired Mr. Steiner, but you'd agree you should have known.
I would not agree with that, ma'am. We actually reached out to Irvine High School specifically, which is where this complaint was filed. They were one of those references, and they're the ones that said his stress management wasn't a serious problem. And when we asked them if there was anything else we needed to know, they told us there wasn't. I sure wish that we'd known this, but I would not agree that we should have. We reached out to this high school specifically.
But Mr. McCulloch, you're responsible for the health and safety of your student athletes.
We are.
You're responsible for vetting all your coaches thoroughly.
That's correct. That's why we reached out to this high school as the most recent place of employment.
Yet the first time you saw these complaints was after May 25th, 2019?
That's correct. The high school didn't send them over to us when we asked them for a reference.
You're aware that that's over 2 years after you hired Mr. Steiner.
Yes, ma'am.
You're aware that Irvine High School is the last school Mr. Steiner worked at before you hired her?
That's right. That's why we reached out to them for reference.
It's one of the employers who gave him a 3 out of 7 in responding to stress?
Yes, it's actually the employer that said that their stress was not a serious problem.
But you chose not to follow up with this employer.
When they told us it wasn't a serious problem, we took them at their word.
And because you didn't follow up, you hired someone who had bruised and hit a student?
Based on what they told us, we did hire Coach Steiner, yes.
You hired someone who threatened to hit a student with a baseball bat.
Ma'am, I don't know if that's true. I'm not personally familiar with what these complaints say, and I didn't run the investigation at Irvine. I just know what Irvine told us.
Is it your testimony today you're not familiar with what these complaints say?
I'm testifying that I'm not familiar with what the investigation happened was. So
this report says that he threatened to hit a student with a baseball bat.
It says that, ma'am, yes.
And that's the same person you hired.
After this school sent us over a reference that gave us a clean bill of health, yes.
Now, let's talk about Mr. Steiner's performance after you hired him. You're aware that during the 2019 season, complaints were made about Steiner's coaching.
I'm aware complaints were made about playing time, yes.
You're aware that Mr. Steiner was ejected from an away game in April 2019.
I am now, yes. I saw that incident report with the lawsuit.
And in April 2019, you didn't suspend Mr. Steiner?
No, ma'am, in April 2019, we hadn't received that incident report. So we didn't know he'd been ejected.
Again, you're telling us you didn't know at the time, but you heard Ms. Diaz testify to that she filed an incident report.
She said that.
You heard her tell us that those incident reports are automatically sent to athletic directors.
I heard her say that, but that's not my experience with the MHSAA. They're always sent through pen and paper, through traditional mail. And I'm not sure how many incident reports they do or don't send us when they do their investigation.
To be clear, Mr. McCulloch, you're telling us you didn't receive this incident report, correct?
We didn't, ma'am. That's correct.
You don't know if someone else in your office received it,
We don't, no.
if any other member of your staff received that document.
I know I'm the one that handles the athletics, and I certainly didn't receive that document.
It's possible that that document was delivered to your office, though, isn't it?
I wouldn't know.
You're telling me it's impossible that that letter was delivered to your office?
No, ma'am, I'm telling you, I wouldn't know.
And about a month after that incident report was filed, you attended the Woodchucks championship game.
Yes, I did.
You saw a baseball bat hit Sena Yoshida in the head.
Yes, I did.
You ran to the dugout.
Yeah, I wanted to see how I could help.
You spoke to Mr. Steiner.
I did.
And that's when Mr. Steiner said, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry."
He did say that. And I mean, at that point, I thought that that was the least that he could do.
Thank you, Mr. McCulloch. I have no further questions.
Any redirect examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Michalek, opposing counsel just asked you a few questions about how you reacted to those reference letters. Sir, if a candidate gets flustered during a game, is that something you're worried about from a violence and anger perspective?
No, not at all. I mean, baseball is important, but it's high school baseball. If the coach gets a little flustered sometimes, we can accept that. It's certainly not anything serious that would be a red flag for us.
Sir, if a coach couldn't make adjustments quickly or adapt to situations on the field, would that be a red flag from a behavioral perspective for you?
From a behavioral perspective, not at all.
Mr. Wilson, can we get Exhibit 11 up again? Sir, in these documents, do you ask specific questions regarding Coach Steiner's interaction with his players?
Yes, we do.
Sir, how did Coach Steiner score on interpersonal skills with students?
Almost perfect. Perfect is a 7, and Coach Steiner got a 6.
Mr. Wilson, you can take the document down now. Opposing counsel also asked you that you didn't follow up with Irvine High School. Sir, did you give Irvine High School an opportunity to tell you about possible instances of violence from Coach Steiner?
Yes, sir. In every single one of those references, the very last question that we ask is totally open. It says, is there absolutely anything else we need to know about this applicant before we hire him? They just said, no, there isn't anything else we need to know.
Thank you, sir. Your Honor, nothing further.
Any recross?
And Your Honor.
Thank you. This witness is excused. Is the defense prepared to call your next witness at this time?
We are, Your Honor. Defense calls Coach Alex Steiner.
You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening. Can you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Hi, I'm Alex Steiner.
What do you do for a living, sir?
I teach middle school math, algebra, and geometry. And I also used to coach high school baseball, but these days I focus on coaching my daughter's 11-12 team.
How'd you get into coaching baseball?
I grew up playing ball in northern Maine. I was a catcher. My uncle took me to my first Sox game when I was 5, and I fell in love with the game. These days, to stay involved with baseball, I coach because my knees can't take the catching anymore.
Where'd you start, sir?
Well, let's see. My first gig was actually in Louisiana back in 2010. A little baseball in the Bayou, and then after a few years there, I moved up to Midlands, where I coached at Woodward High School for a couple of years. A little bit chillier up here.
Sir, we're here today because you injured one of your players. What happened?
Yeah. I'll address this now. I have struggled with anger issues in the past. I acknowledge that, and it's something I've worked on. It's something I continue to work on. Some of my actions I am certainly not proud of, and I'm working on it.
Just so the members of the jury understand, I'm going to have to walk you through those actions today. All right?
Okay.
Can you tell us about that incident that brought you here today?
It was a state championship game, and our star player, Sana Yoshida, was up to bat, and she struck out to end the game, to end the season.
What'd you do?
Look, I love these kids. I really do. But sometimes I have trouble controlling my emotions. And I was swinging a bat just out of frustration, and it left my hands. It hit Sana. And to her family, I know that sorry will never be enough. And I wish there was something I could do. Some way I could take back what I did.
Well, sir, I want to take a step back, all the way to when you first started coaching baseball. Where was your first head coaching job?
That was at Weed Swamp High School in Louisiana.
Why'd you leave?
I was fired. The athletic director had received some complaints from parents that I was being a little too aggressive.
What about Woodward High School? When were you hired there?
That was in the fall of 2017.
And who hired you, sir?
Mel Michalek, the athletic director.
What did Mr. Michalek ask you about in your interview?
Oh, well, he asked me about my experience, my coaching style, what kind of culture I wanted to create for the kids. I told him all about my philosophy, and I think he ate it up.
Did he ever ask you why you left Weed Swamp?
Yeah.
Did you tell them that you were fired, sir?
Yeah, I did. I said it was because the boosters didn't like me.
Did you tell him what you just told us today? That you have trouble controlling your temper?
No. No, I didn't.
Sir, did you tell Mr. Michalek what you just told us a few minutes ago? That you were fired because parents complained that you were too aggressive?
No, I didn't bring that stuff up. I mean, look, it was a job interview. I wanted to put my best foot forward.
All right, sir. Then I want to talk about what happened after you were hired. Were you ever ejected from a game while you coached at Woodward?
Yes. Other than the Sana Yoshida incident, I was ejected one other time.
When was that other time you were ejected, sir?
It was about a month before the state championship. I had given our second baseman the bunt sign, and she couldn't get the bunt down. So I yelled some things that I now regret.
What'd you yell?
I told her to get the bunt down in less nice terms.
So, sir, the umpire threw you out for that?
No, after she came back to the dugout, I was taking a helmet off, and emotions were running high, and I ended up accidentally knocking her over.
What happened next?
Well, the umpire came over and she tossed me from the game. Said I had assaulted my own player. I mean, the whole thing was a mistake. It was all a big mistake.
Did you ever tell Mr. Michelle about what had happened?
Well, we talked about that game, but I didn't really want to get into it. I mean, it was a mistake, so I just didn't bring it up.
Hold on, sir. Did you ever tell Mr. Michelle that you had been ejected from that game?
No, I didn't. I love those kids, and I didn't want to lose them. I didn't want to lose my job.
Thank you for your time, sir. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Good evening, Mr. Steiner.
Good evening, ma'am. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Can't complain.
Now, I want to start about talking about your history of coaching baseball before you were hired at Woodward High School, okay?
Sure.
So like you mentioned on direct, so you've been coaching baseball for over a decade, right?
Right. I started back in 2010.
And just like you mentioned on direct, you were fired from two high schools, Wheat Swamp and Irvin High, right?
That's right.
Now, Mr. Steiner, I want to move on to what you did after you were fired from those schools. You applied to coach at Woodward High School, right?
After Irvine, yes, I applied to coach at Woodward.
You actually even had an interview with the athletic director, right?
Yes, I had several interviews with the athletic director, panel.
And during your interview with the athletic director, you told them that you were fired from Swamp High, correct?
Wheat Swamp High, yes, that's correct.
And you told the director it was because of your coaching tactics that you were fired, right?
Right. I said it was because the boosters didn't like my strict coaching tactics.
Yes, you mentioned to the athletic director that there were complaints made about your coaching style.
Complaints by the boosters. Yes, that's right.
And I want to be clear, the athletic director never asked you what those complaints were about, right?
He didn't have to. I told him it was about strict coaching tactics.
So that's a no. The athletic director did not ask you about those complaints, correct?
That's a no, yep.
And they never asked what to see those complaints, did they?
I don't know what kind of complaints they were, but no, they didn't ask.
In fact, the athletic director never asked you specifically why they took issue with your coaching style, right?
Again, I told him it was because of my strict coaching tactics.
And to be clear, the athletic director never asked if you ever had to go under any anger management counseling, correct?
No, I didn't bring up that I had an anger issue.
But back to my question, the athletic director didn't ask you about your temper, correct?
No.
And the athletic director never asked you how you handled stress, did they?
No, I didn't get that specific question.
In fact, the athletic director told you that they liked the record of Wheat Swamp High School, right?
Yeah, we had a real good ball club.
And they told you that they thought you could lead Woodward High to an undefeated season, right, Mr. Steiner?
You're right. I was flattered.
And in the same interview, Mr. Steiner, you told the athletic director you punched a hole in the wall during a game, right?
That's right. I did punch a wall once.
And after you told the athletic director that, he told you that if you break both of your hands and we win state, then I won't care. That's what they said to you, right?
Yeah, Mel has a bit of a interesting sense of humor.
And so that's a yes. The athletic director said that to you after you punched the wall.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I actually want to talk to you about your work at Woodward High School. You coached during the 2018-2019 season, right, sir?
Right. That was my first season at Woodward.
And in April, while you were coaching a game, you were kicked off the field, weren't you?
That was the second season. But yes, I was ejected.
And as you left the fields, you grabbed a baseball bat, right, Mr. Steiner?
You're right. I was frustrated, and I grabbed a bat and I slammed it down into the dirt in front of me.
And because of what happened, an incident report was filed against you, right, Mr. Steiner?
Yeah, it was shown to me. Yeah.
Mr. Steiner, you thought you were going to get suspended because of your behavior at that baseball game.
Yeah, I was worried about it for sure.
But Mr. Steiner, you were never suspended, were you?
No, I honestly, I don't know if the administration ever even found out about it.
But just to be clear, Mr. Steiner, no action was ever taken against you after that incident report was filed, right?
No, that's right.
In fact, the athletic director during that season told you that you were making good progress with the team, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, we were undefeated.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Redirect.
No redirect, Your Honor. We just ask that this witness be excused.
Witness is excused. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further witnesses for the defense?
No, Your Honor. Defense rests our case in chief, and we're ready to go into closings or take a break.
All right, Ms. Beto, is it your preference to continue or take a brief recess?
We can take a brief recess, Your Honor.
Okay. How long would you like?
5 to 10 minutes if time allows and opposing the counsel agrees.
All right. Mr. Zhao, any objection to a 5-minute recess?
No, Your Honor, that'd be great.
All right. We'll see you in 5 minutes. Thank you. Do we have defense counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. Defense counsel's here.
Yeah. Ms. Beto, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
They looked the other way. It came at a price. Miss Sana Yoshida paid that price. A teenage girl who had her whole life ahead of her. Instead of getting ready for her next baseball game, her next class, her next school dance, she'll never play again. In fact, she has to deal with a traumatic brain injury every day of her life. That makes things more difficult for her. And you learn today it's because of what happened on May 25th, 2019. The Woodchucks were at the state championship game. Miss Sana Yoshida was a rising baseball star. And she and her team were working together to try to win that game. And it's her time to shine. She goes up and the crowd is watching intensely because it's a close game. And she swings and she misses. She swings twice more and she misses again. Her team loses. And you heard today how her coach, Mr. Steiner, reacted. You learned today that Mr. Steiner got upset, that Mr. Steiner got aggressive. And you also learned today that it wasn't the first time Mr. Steiner got upset at a baseball game, that it wasn't the first time Mr. Steiner picked up a baseball bat. And you learned today that it wasn't the first time Mr. Steiner's behavior posed a risk to other students. In fact, you learned time after time Woodward High School looks the other way. Folks, you learned that this all could have been prevented if they had done their job to ensure the responsibility and prioritize the safety of their students. They were negligent when they hired and retained Alex Steiner. And that's why today we brought a claim of negligent hiring and retention against Woodward High School. And that means we had to prove to you that Mr. Steiner was hired and employed by Woodward High School. And second, that Mr. Steiner was unfit for his job and his behavior posed a risk to others. Third, that Woodward High School knew or should have known that Mr. Steiner was unfit, and that Mr. Steiner's unfitness or incompetence as a baseball coach harmed Sana Yoshida. And that it was ultimately Woodward High School's negligence in hiring and retaining Mr. Steiner caused Sana's injury. Members of the jury, we had to prove this to you by our preponderance of the evidence. And all that means is if you think that it's more likely than not that the defendant's negligent retention and hiring of Mr. Steiner led to the proximate harm of Mr. Yoshida, you have to find them liable. But now I want to reframe the elements I just said in light of what we heard today in trial. One, should Woodward High School have known Mr. Steiner was unfit as a baseball coach when they hired him and when they employed him? Second, was Mr. Steiner's unfitness responsible for Sana Yoshida's injury? Members of the jury, the defense answered those questions for you today. The defense admitted themselves from the start of today's trial that because Woodward High School didn't know about Mr. Steiner's unfitness beforehand, they can't be held liable for negligence. Folks, that's not how the law works. The law says crystal clear that if Mr. Steiner was unfit, Woodward High School should have known about it when they hired him. They should have known it when they retained him. Today, the defense has conceded that Mr. Steiner was unfit to coach. You heard time and time again that if they would have known, they would never have hired him. And let's not forget, folks, you also heard from Miss Bajamila, a local reporter who actually witnessed Mr. Steiner coach at a baseball game. She told you she was so concerned that she started an investigation. And through her investigation, she discovered 9 separate complaints. And she was able to do that with one phone call. In fact, she even tried to notify the school about these complaints. And you heard today, or you heard the athletic director claim that they never received them. If one phone call was all it took for a local journalist to receive those complaints, Why couldn't Woodward High School have done that? And most importantly, folks, you heard that the athletic director wasn't aware of those complaints. But when the athletic director interviewed Mr. Steiner told him there were complaints made against him. But you heard from Mr. Steiner when he got on the stand that the athletic director never asked about those complaints, never followed up on those complaints, never asked Mr. Steiner how his temper was, or if he ever had to go through anger management counseling. No, instead what you heard was that the athletic director told Mr. Steiner he didn't care if he broke both hands as long as they won state. In fact, you heard the athletic director say that they thought Mr. Steiner could have led Woodward High School to an undefeated season. Woodward High was not kept in the dark, members of the jury. They chose to look away because they cared more about their record than the safety of their players. Folks, you even heard from Miss Diaz come to the stand, the umpire of many of the games Mr. Steiner coached. In fact, Miss Diaz even filed an incident report in April 2019, but there was no follow-up. Nothing was done because Woodward High School decided to look the other way. They weren't kept in the dark. They chose not to look. They chose not to follow up. And folks, let's ask ourselves, is it reasonable that the Woodward High School, their athletic department, missed 9 complaints made against Mr. Steiner, missed the fact that he was terminated twice from coaching and teaching at 2 high schools, missed a reporter's phone calls about those complaints? That's not reasonable. It's negligent hiring and retention. If Woodward High School would have done their job, they would have followed up on those references. If Woodward High School would have done their job, they would have looked into any complaints against Mr. Steiner. They would have looked into the April 2019 incident report. If they would have done their job, Sana Yoshida would be happy and healthy today, preparing for her next baseball game. But they didn't do their job. They weren't reasonable, they were negligent. I'm asking you to do what they couldn't do. Don't look away. Look at the facts, look at the evidence, and find Woodward High School liable. Thank you.
Thank you. Defense?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
We've heard a lot today. The arguments, the testimony, but out of all of it, it was 3 words that stuck out to me especially. And it didn't come from any of the attorneys or the plaintiff's witnesses. It came from Mr. Mashalik, the athletic director. I didn't know. You see, we asked him about Coach Steiner's problems at his old job, at Woodward, at that game he got ejected from. And he told you, I didn't know. Because that's the truth. Woodward High School didn't know everything about Coach Steiner. They didn't know about those problems because those were the problems he hid. Members of the jury, we didn't hide anything from you today. We were open with you about what those problems were, and that Coach Steiner did have those problems. And we answer those 2 questions my co-counsel, Mr. Maroka, asked you at the beginning of today's trial. What did they know? And what did he hide? But we didn't have to answer those questions or bring forward any evidence, because today, as the defense, we had no burden. It was the plaintiff who brought forward those 2 claims, one of negligent retention and one of negligent hiring, which meant they had a lot to prove. Not only did they have to prove that Coach Steiner was unfit and that his unfitness caused Sana Yoshida's injury, but they had to prove to you a 3rd element, that the school knew or should have known that Coach Steiner was unfit, both when they hired him and while they employed him. Each of those elements they had to prove by a preponderance of the evidence, or more likely than not. But the plaintiff wasn't able to do that today. They try to tell you all about how Coach Steiner had anger issues, that he sometimes took things on the field too far. And we agree. What he did to Sana Yoshida during that state championship game was too far. It was wrong. Which is why he was fired immediately after. But it's not Coach Steiner the plaintiff is suing today. It's Woodward High School. So I'm going to focus on that third element. What did Woodward High School know? You see, the only person who could answer that today was the athletic director. Mr. Michalak told you what they knew. How when they hired Coach Steiner, they did a criminal background check, found nothing. How when they got 3 references from Coach Steiner, all positive reviews. How once he was hired, there wasn't a single complaint about Coach Steiner. And not from a parent, a student, a spectator, opposing player, opposing coach, no. You even asked the coach himself how things were going, never heard anything there. Sure, they knew that he yelled sometimes, that he punched a wall once in a 20-year coaching career, but members of the jury, that didn't make Woodward think he was unfit. Plaintiff told you that Woodward High School looked the other way. Well, members of the jury, you can't look for something that you don't know exists. You can't look for something that's hidden. Because you learned today how they never knew about Coach Steiner's issues. He hid them. He told you today how when he was being interviewed, he hid his problems from that athletic director. You see, those complaints parents had made at his old job that the plaintiff showed you today, he made sure Woodward High School couldn't find out about that. The fact that he had sometimes trouble controlling his anger, couldn't find out about that either. He hid his way into getting that job, and then he hid his way into keeping it. He admitted to them how he never told Mr. Michalak about that incident before, when he got thrown out of a game and threw a bat at the ump. In fact, you learned today how that incident report never made its way to Mr. Michalak's desk. But the plaintiff wants you to believe that Woodward High School should have known all of that, how they should have known everything about what was going on. Well, members of the jury, I want you to think about what you'd do if you were buying a house. You'd want to know about its history, if there had been any problems, talk to the former homeowners, ask them if there were issues. And if you did every single one of those things, but nothing popped up, because one of the homeowners hid them from you, no one would say you hadn't done your due diligence. No one would say you hadn't done your job. No one would say you should have known about the problems that they hid. Well, that's exactly what the school did here. They ran a full background check on Coach Steiner, asked reference after reference, even interviewed him himself. Clean as a whistle. They did everything they reasonably could have been expected to do. To hear the plaintiff tell it, you think that to hire someone, an employer needs to trudge through every single thing they've ever had. Hire a private investigator, talk to every person that person has ever worked with, and try and find a problem. Even when all the research they have done didn't show a single one. Members of the jury, that's just not reasonable. And that's not what the law requires. Woodward High School did everything they should have, but they still didn't know because those problems, they were hidden. But all throughout today's trial, the plaintiff has told you how Woodward High School definitely knew those documents were sent. Ms. Diaz tried to tell you that she sent the incident report to Ms. Michalak, but then she admitted she never actually saw that report sent out herself. Ms. Bajamila tried to tell you how she sent those complaints to Mr. Michalak, then couldn't provide any proof. Even told you she likes to add flair to what she says sometimes. But I'm sure when Ms. Beto gets up here in a moment, she's going to try to keep on telling you the same thing. When she does, see if she can give you a date. Not when something happened, not when something was written. When was it sent? because they didn't give that to you today throughout today's trial, let alone when it was read. Never heard a date that incident report was read. Never heard a date those complaints were shown to Mr. Michelle. We didn't hear a date because Coach Steiner hid them. Woodward High School never read them. Find them not liable. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there time remaining for rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor, I have 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
You may proceed.
Members of the jury, Mr. Zhao just got up here and told you that Woodward High School couldn't have known what Mr. Steiner chose to hide from them. I want to break that down. Let's talk about what they actually did know. They were put on notice during Mr. Steiner's interview that he was fired from 2 previous jobs. They knew that Mr. Steiner punched a wall during a baseball game in public. They knew during that interview, Mr. Steiner told them that he yelled and threatened his players. They knew that there were complaints made against Mr. Steiner. And let's talk about what Mr. Steiner hid, or what he didn't hide, to be more specific. He didn't hide his behavior at the baseball games. He didn't hide his anger. He didn't hide anything. No, members of the jury. They chose to look away. Throughout today's trial, we showed you physical evidence. You saw those documents of those complaints. You saw that incident reports. What's more likely? That the athletic director in Woodward High School didn't see those documents, or they chose not to look for them. Let's be clear, we are here today for Sana Yoshida, but we are here today because of Woodward High School's negligence. And so I'm urging you that when you walk into that deliberation room, that you don't follow Woodward High School's steps. You don't choose to look away. Don't look away and find them liable. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the trial. Ms. Smiley, at this point, do we need to take a brief recess, or would you like me to give some remarks while the ballots are tabulated?
Let's take a quick break, wait for the judges to submit their ballots. And judges, once you have submitted your ballots, if you could turn on your cameras so we know that you're done.
Jeremy, is there a separate ballot for attorneys and witnesses?
No, it's all in the same ballot.
I didn't see that part.
Did you use the new link that she sent?
Mm-hmm.
So there shouldn't have been any attorney or witness for
Witness.
this ballot.
Okay. Okay. I have to put on different glasses when I look directly at the computer screen.
All right, I think everybody has completed and submitted their ballots then. So if we can have the judges come back on the screen, and competitors, if you want to come on as well, it's up to you. Okay, great. Well, I want to congratulate you guys on a great final round. It's a really good round. Glad we had these two teams in the final. So I'll start off with, we'll have Judge Nelmark begin the comments, and then he can pass it to the next judge, and you guys can keep passing it on until we've finished the comments. And then once that's done and all the ballots are tabulated, we'll get the results out as soon as possible.
Thank you to AMTA and the tournament organizers for inviting me this evening. It was a great way to spend a Sunday night. Thanks to all the competitors for making it enjoyable. I thought the performances were very strong across the board. I'll leave the comments on performance to my fellow scoring judges here. I'll just share a few thoughts on the online nature of the activity, because I've given a lot of feedback over the last 16 months of remote hearings. Coincidentally, an acronym that helps you remember some of those things in connection with this case would be BATS, background, angles, technology, and screen sharing. I thought everyone had a good professional background. Some of the witnesses had fun with that added to their characters. As far as angles, a number of the attorneys were sitting during their presentation. It was fine. I got to see your face very well, but when you would gesture, your hands would often fall off camera. So keep in mind not only what the camera looks at when you're behind it, but how people are seeing you. And then the defense opener, the camera was further back, could see all of his gestures, but there was an odd angle in the background that when you moved to your left, it made it look like you might hit your head on a low ceiling. So you just have to see it from the other side of the camera and take a look at that. The technology is everything else, lights and so forth. That went by and large very well, but I have to call myself out. I tested my camera and my microphone, but had never really tested the lights in this new courtroom, and I didn't realize they were motion activated and would go out periodically. So when I muted my camera once or twice, it was to run around and get the lights back on. And then lastly, screen share. That generally added to the presentations. The one thing to keep in mind is judges might be viewing this on a smaller screen. So if you have multiple documents on at the same time, it can be difficult to read them. And then the judges are screening to see what they say and losing track of what the rest of your presentation is. But I enjoyed it very much. I hope you continue on with mock trial in some capacity in the future. Whether or not you go on to law school, remember that the reason you've had a great experience with this activity is all of the volunteers who came back as coaches, and judges, and tournament volunteers. And please pay it forward so that the next generation coming through can have that same great experience. With that, I will turn it over to who I see on my top left, Mr. Daly. Go ahead.
Well, I won't take up too much of your time. Y'all did an amazing job. This was a great round to watch. On the note of screen sharing, the one thing I will note I don't know if you are going to be doing it in person or this way for the next year, but if you are screen sharing certain things, just make sure that what you're screen sharing isn't getting ahead of what is being testified to, because I think that that was an issue in several different times where your technician may be clicking a little bit faster than you are. So you just got to make sure that y'all are in sync. The other thing I'll just note, a lot of times, particularly when teams like y'all that are so good are competing, a lot of the difference in scoring, I think, often ends up being not the times that you've all practiced 100 times, but the little things in trials that you don't. And so really think about when you're starting to do something off script, am I digging myself into a hole? Because I think there were some times where I would guess if I asked my other scoring judges if they were confused, they probably also would say that they were, because I'm not really sure what was going on at several points. And so I think you have to learn when to fight and when to back off. And so just be cognizant of that. But overall, I mean, from the beginning to the end, really great round and really strong performances from everybody. So thank you for this opportunity.
All right, thank you, Ms. Mack.
Yeah, so really great job, everyone. I had a difficult time scoring, which is always a good sign. I thought that the witnesses were particularly strong and really gave a lot of people a hard time on cross, which, but I think, you know, that each lawyer dealt with it well. And I also think that there were a few times on the defense side where you had a hard time on cross, but when the defense put up their case in chief, it seemed like everyone recovered. And I really like to see that, because both in mock trial and in real life, you know, sometimes you don't get the objection rulings that you want, and evidence, you know, doesn't go the way that you want, but the ability to kind of push forward and stay on plan, stay on track, keep your composure. I was really impressed with that. And good luck.
Thank you. Ms. Casey, go ahead.
Yeah, you guys were all great. Is everybody a senior, including the witnesses? You guys already decided if you're going to law school and where you're going? Any undecideds out there? Well, if there's undecideds, that's why I put my email in there, right? So it's a little too late for me to recruit seniors who've probably already committed to law schools, but there was really just something that I loved about everybody. So your real names are cut off, but the defendant, the coach, Alex Steiner, there was, you came across like a baseball coach and kind of sounded and acted like one, which I thought was really good. The accents, I don't know how many of them were fake and how many of them were real. Virginia, your Southern accent, I'm in the South, I don't know if it was real. Ms. Pasha, yours was beautiful, fake or real. Congrats to you. So the witnesses were just great. And all of the lawyers, I could give you a favorite part about each one of you. It was very difficult to score. I hate Zoom. I hope that when you're in law school that I get to see you in person, but of course you'll be on another team kicking my team around the courtroom. And so, but I'll think, oh, I remember that person. So congratulations to all of y'all and good luck.
Very good. Gotham, go ahead.
Thanks, Judge. First, I would say congratulations. I think, certainly it's always a little bit tough during the summer to kind of get ramped up for one last trial. So I just want to say excellently done. It was a pleasure to watch. I certainly remember what it was like being where y'all are. This is definitely a different format, and I think you all did wonderfully with kind of the format. I think just my overall sort of guidance moving forward is that, and I would really echo a lot of the comments of my fellow judge, Mr. Daly, that I think that there's a real temptation to just sort of go through the script and kind of move forward, right? And a lot of that, look, that's going to be flawless, right? You all have done this enough. You know how to kind of do that. And I think it really ends up being the margins that really matter. The stuff that isn't expected, the stuff that you don't necessarily know where it's coming. And how cleanly you handle that stuff, I think, is really what separates the best from the absolute best. And so I would really, really strongly encourage you. I love that risks were taken, and I think you can't learn anything unless you take those risks. And I know that's really, really challenging, especially when the stakes are so high, especially in a finals round like this. So I just really, really want to say, thank you for having the courage to do that, because I think that is really, really where the learning takes place. Along those lines, though, I think that part of that process is developing the judgment to know how to approach those things. And so I think that it's a really, really important skill that as you move forward, and I can only assume a lot of you are going to become lawyers, as is often the case with folks who end up competing in one last trial or one last time as you're kind of preparing over the summer. I would just encourage you to really, really hone in on that skill, to really try and develop it, to feel comfortable thinking on your feet. And it ends up being really challenging because you're sort of, the adrenaline's a bit overwhelming. And so it's important to be able to calm yourself down enough to think 2 or 3 steps ahead. And how do I really kind of put this person into the corner that I need them to be in? That being said, on the technology side, I think it was handled really, really well throughout. I thought it was really seamless. One point I would make is that I know someone else is handling your technology, but oftentimes when you have multiple exhibits at the same time, I wasn't able to read what was important. And because I'm not able to read what was important, and despite there being kind of a focus on a particular element, and I think it was 7A and 7B in particular, for the most part, both of those were up side by side the entire time. And I would say that when you're focusing in on 7A, bring in 7A and make it so that I can see it, and then having somebody highlight what's the important things to be thought about would be really, really helpful, just as a guide. And I'm sure that we're all going to return back to a world where Zoom is, sort of a bastion of our memories. But if this continues, and as the evidence seems to suggest it could, I would just kind of take that to heart as you move on to sort of the next phase. The last thing I would say is, and to sort of echo Judge Nelmark's, is that certainly all of us who have done undergraduate mock trial, we come back and we do it, and we build a life sort of around it, rightly or wrongly. And so I really would encourage you all to pay it forward. I think it's so important. It was obviously critical and valuable to me, and it really helped formulate a lot of where my life ended up going. And I would just hope that you would do the same. And sort of the last point that I would make is that, I think it's really, really tough when you get to law school, especially in mock trial. I know for me, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I ended up kind of floating around for about a decade as a prosecutor, and then kind of changed directions because I just didn't really have a clear sense, and I felt like it was what I was supposed to do. And so I would say try and find yourself somebody who you really trust, but most importantly, listen to yourselves and listen to kind of what your voice is telling you of what's right and what's wrong for you. And so just have that faith. And again, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this opportunity. Thank you so much for the effort that you all put in. And I think you all have a great deal to be proud of, and I hope that you all get an opportunity to enjoy the summer, and best of luck to whoever the winner is, and I'm excited to see who it will be.
Excellent. Ms. Smiley, at this point, can you tell us who the competitors, where the competitors are from, or can we have them do that?
Yeah, sure. Let's go ahead and have the plaintiff team. Why don't you identify each of your schools?
Okay, I can start. Hi, everyone. My name is Veronica, and I am from Rutgers University. Well, I'm a graduate now from Rutgers University.
I'm Aisha Pasha. I'm from Stanford.
Keegan Coppola. I just graduated from Boston College, and I'm starting at Pepperdine Law in the fall.
I'm Virginia Shalino. I just graduated from Wesleyan and undecided regarding what law school, so you might be hearing from me, Ms. Casey.
Very good.
All right, the defense team, can you tell us where you guys are from?
I'm Sahil. I graduated from the University of Chicago, and I'm starting at Stanford Law in the fall.
Michael. I went to Northwestern University. Sahil's a rival.
I'm Alberto. I went to NYU.
I'm Jacob. I also went to Northwestern.
I'm Will Wilson, and I went to Tufts. Graduated Tufts.
Great. I think one of the best things about this tournament is all of you guys getting to, break apart the team affiliations and come together and just, do what you love and do this activity together. I think that's one of the best parts of this program. All right, so we have our 2 AMPTA reps in the room, and they are here to announce the winners. So I'm going to turn it over to Elise and Angela.
Hi, everyone. We want to thank the judges again for volunteering, thanking the competitors, And of course, Elizabeth Smiley and everyone on the OLT tournament committee has been so amazing. And my co-rep, Elise, she's even just the best. But we want to go ahead and get the winner to you. The final round champion for OLT Tournament 2021 is Team 43, 3-1. Congratulations.
Congrats to both teams. This was an awesome and close trial, and congrats especially to Team 43.
Yes.
Congratulations, guys. Thank you for a great round.
Great round.
That was amazing.
Great round.
Undefeated. Y'all are undefeated at one last time. That's amazing.
Thank you all so much.
Great round, guys. So much fun.
Yes, everybody did an amazing job.